how much would it take to take a punch from Cris Cyborg? Like, doesn't necessarily have to be money. Like, whatever you...
Oh, hold on. I don't know where this is headed. First of all, are people watching? In front of 20,000? Like Barclays?
I mean, it's a video that's probably go viral.
It's going viral. Am I getting knocked out? Yeah, I got no chin.
I mean, we're...
Let's be honest. I'm going down.
You giving your chin no chance?
A lot of
here?
drunken wrestling matches. I'm going down. Man, I don't know. You said it's on pay-per-view? Are people watching this? Not that I'm a draw, but like people are watching this?
It's just YouTube viral.
Going viral. Okay, it's going viral. 10 grand? Am I going, if I'm going out 10 grand, 20 grand?
Going out.
That's the lowest amount you, like, you wouldn't do it for anything less
One
than 10
punch, or is
grand.
there a time limit?
What? That changes things, right?
Well, I can
survive a minute with Cyborg?
Yeah.
Get this much?
Run away for
Let's
a
do
minute.
one round. You got to go one round in the cage.
50 grand. I can't do it.
1 round, 5
I'm
minutes?
getting hurt bad. What about you?
With a 140-pound Cris Cyborg.
Have you seen her? I'm gonna get my ass. Don't take it that way. I'm not.
I want a
dick.
performance bonus. That's what I want. 50 grand. I'll go with that.
50 grand?
I'll take that.
So 40 grand, you're not doing it.
You're putting on a performance. I mean, you're not necessarily doing it, but you're going to be the butt of all jokes.
Guys, I'm broke. I would do this for 10 grand.
You're just
I'm
all
not
in.
gonna lie. 10 grand, I would do it.
Just take a shot.
Yeah, because if you go out, you're out. You're done.
That's true.
You're not gonna get. I would get knocked out by anyone for 10 grand.
Whoa!
It's $10,000 to get knocked out.
Derek Lewis?
I don't want.
You said anyone.
As long as it doesn't break my jaw, I think I'm okay with that.
Yeah, well,
because
no
if
promises.
you know,
Cyborg might break your jaw.
Yeah, I was
Very
gonna say,
true.
let's not kid ourselves.
I am
here.
past my prime.
Then there's the I'm immediately like, what if you land one though? Cyborg's terrible. But like Derek Lewis, Taylor? What if you land?
Oh, that's funny. I wasn't even thinking about fighting back. That wasn't even in my
you
mind.
unnecessarily
to survive a round. What is this,
become an
bully
internet
beatdown?
hero? Yeah,
I was
hero.
just trying to cover up, take
Just
my
survive.
shots, and survive.
Herb Dean will let it go. So, I mean, you're good.
Oh,
man.
there it is.
All right. Well, welcome to MMA Untold. My name is Taylor Gabriels. That there is the Godfather, Tim Thomas. And the man who introduced the question at the beginning of the show is none other than the scrappy one, Zach Gratton. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's been a while, and I'm glad to see you guys. I haven't even seen you guys since the last time we recorded.
It's been a bit.
Well, stop having babies.
Oh, well.
There.
All right. Well, this is the story of Cris Cyborg. Cris Cyborg stands at 5 feet 8 inches tall, 170 pounds of rippling muscle covered in tattoos. Her hair is dyed pink and braided in tight rows against her skull. She is the most feared female fighter in the world. And with a record of 21-1, it can be argued she's the best to ever compete.
Yeah, and I mean, look, we're going to find out in her fight with Amanda Nunes. This is kind of going to be the closest thing to a super fight we're ever going to get with her. So this is kind of the perfect time to talk about her, because if she wins this, she's kind of done it all. You know, I mean, look, we're going to talk about the Ronda stuff. We'll never get the super fight that was, right? But over time, we kind of saw some of Ronda's deficiencies, and I think Amanda's even more of a super fight. The fans won't see it that way, but in reality,
It really is.
this will be the best fight she's ever had. So it's a pretty good time to go over her story.
Can we just talk about the fact that Taylor said she's 5'8", and I thought she was like 6'3",
She's an
like
absolute
just a monster.
It's true.
Like, what? I saw 5'8", and I'm like, really? She's 4 inches shorter than me. What the hell's going on here? And she's massive.
Yeah, that really threw me off too. When I was doing the research, I was like, 5'8". I really did think she was 6 feet tall.
Yeah, seriously, because she towers over everyone.
But
And-
that's, celebrities are like that a lot of times. Like when you meet certain celebrities in person and you think they're taller or maybe even shorter than you imagine them to be. And then you see them in person, you're like, holy, like, have you ever met a celebrity where you were shocked by their size?
Chris Berman.
What?
You know Chris Berman, I'm
yeah, I didn't
assuming.
see that. I mean, of all answers.
Chris Berman is, he sits behind a desk. You don't really, I thought he was probably 5'10", average height for a man. Saw him walking, 6'5".
Really?
Massive. He's
Holy
a
shit.
big dude. Not only that, Mr. Daddy Longlegs over here flailing around, just walking around, man, he due to some injuries or whatnot, he can't really walk. He's really slow.
Don't they like play games with the chairs on the network shows? Is that why he doesn't look so tall? Because don't they like level them out sort of?
I'm
if you're
sure
short, they
keep
raise
them-
you up.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because I mean, you got someone like Jay Glazer who's like 5'4" sitting next to Michael Strahan. Like you need to bump him up. But
See, now I'm just thinking about how much I would pay you guys to let me in the cage with Chris Berman for all those fucking backs he hits during the home run derby. That son of a bitch. A long history with Chris Berman.
I would have never guessed him to be that tall.
he's tall, man. He's a big guy. Like I had no idea, and then I saw him. I was like, It's a lookalike or what's going on? But he's a big guy.
That's incredible. Have you ever met any celebrity
No,
that was?
I'm thinking right now.
For me, there was two people that one that I thought was much taller that I also thought was probably 6 foot, maybe 6'1", was David Beckham, and he was
Really?
tiny dude, man, real small guy,
Oh wow. Okay.
right? When he's wearing Calvin Klein underwear,
Okay.
he looks big.
She stumbled
Not
on that
that-
one.
no,
Hey-oh.
No, but seriously, he was a lot smaller all around. Like, his size physically, he was not that intimidating.
Damn.
I think with Cyborg, a big part of the difference in her size too, because when you say, you were jokingly saying the 145-pound thing, and you're like, God, she does not look like she's 145 pounds. But then again, you think about it, most of the time we're seeing her in interviews and any media events, anything like that, she's walking around at like, 175, 180. So she is bigger for a female. So it does make sense that she towers over everyone.
That's big for 5'8".
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's really big for 5'8". Before we go on with her story, so let's talk about how hard this woman hits, because it's great. She hits like a heavyweight. Now, the women's divisions typically aren't known for finishes. Most women do not finish their opponent, but Cyborg finishes almost every opponent. And I did a little bit of research here, and I think Fight Matrix was where I got most of my info here, Sherdog and Fight Matrix. But and I don't know when these numbers were compiled exactly, but at the time,
Is that Metrics or Matrix?
I
hope it's
either
the Matrix
one.
trilogy.
Yeah, Metrics.
You watched the Matrix trilogy?
did, to prepare
With
for
the bullet
this.
time? Got it.
So the heavyweights, male heavyweights, have a 44% knockout rate in their fights, that is the highest among
You
all
said this
weight
heavyweights?
classes. That's
I would,
heavyweights.
oddly, I
You
would
would
actually
have
almost
guessed
think
it
was
higher?
Yeah,
Me too. I
yeah.
would have said around
Yeah.
60%.
Me too,
probably.
yeah.
So the women's featherweight division is around 33%. Okay, that's where Cyborg fights. You want to guess what Cyborg's finish rate is?
Jeez.
Man. She's had 22 fight. Well, no contest. So
Let's
21
count the
fights.
no contest because she got a knockout.
We're gonna
in
count
that.
it.
Let's
Okay.
count that.
So 22, and I think she's only been to what, 2 decisions,
I was gonna say
3 maybe.
I'm gonna guess a really high number and probably ruin the point because I might go too high, like 90%. I mean,
It's gotta be.
It's a little lower
okay,
than that.
I feel like she finishes everybody.
86.
It's 82.
82.
Yeah,
Jesus.
82%.
That's
insane.
crazy.
That's
Yeah.
really high.
Well, she is one of those people. I mean, I'm actually trying to think. Well, Ronda in her heyday, but Cyborg's kind of the one female. Is there anybody else, any other female that you watch that you go in expecting a finish? It was Ronda for sure.
Ronda,
in her
and then
heyday.
lately,
Amanda.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So there's a couple.
That's it,
But
though.
yeah, that's it.
I mean, that's
and
really
Cyborg's
it.
a number one with that. So
yeah, but Cyborg wasn't always the muscle-laden killing machine that she is today. Born Christine, and I don't know if I'm saying that right, Justino Venancio in Curitiba, Brazil. Chris was tall, but she was a pretty skinny girl. Fighting for a living was the furthest thing from young Cyborg's mind, but a less than ideal home life drove Cyborg to sports at the age of 9.
didn't she say, her parents were divorced, her father was struggling with alcohol? I think in one of the interviews she said just basically that she would notice when she was practicing sports or playing sports that she wasn't thinking about what was going on at home. So it was kind of a way out for her. So that's pretty cool, you know?
Yeah, and there's not a lot out there on Cyborg's past. She doesn't really talk much about it. I think recently she started opening up a little bit more because she realizes there's an opportunity to help others who are maybe in that situation. But up until recently, she was pretty mum's the word on her family life, and that's fine. She's entitled to do that. But Yeah, there's not a lot we know about her parents. We just know they were separated. Her father was an alcoholic, and so yeah, she turned to sports to kind of take her mind off things.
If I'm being honest, and this is not my place, and she should do whatever she wants to and whatever she's comfortable with, because I understand some people are private, you don't want your shit aired out, but I think that she's a very polarizing figure. A lot of people have problems with her, myself included at times. And there's not a lot out there on her. And this is stuff that makes her very sympathetic. And I think that she maybe, if I was her or her team, I would encourage to get that out there. Because when you're such a imposing figure like her and you're kind of scary, it's good to show that side. Because I don't think people see that coming.
Yo, I don't know how she was in Invicta because we'll get into it. But like, I didn't know much about her, and I've noticed a change from her first fight in the UFC, like where it was in Brazil and she was thanking the fans, and she doesn't look like when you look at her, you don't see that. And when she brought that out, that kind of like it opened up, like, you know what, damn, she seemed like a pretty good person. And I think she now realizes her platform and the fans that she has, and now she's able to open up and reach out and give that help. So I think it's
tough when your nickname is Cyborg and you literally look like a killing machine.
Yeah.
It's very hard for people to relate to you because no one looks like that.
Normally when we're getting together, in your head, you're trying to make sure, you're well versed on everything about the fighter and understanding their life and what they've gone through, and just making sure you have your ducks in a row for when we get together to talk about this stuff. With her, I was thinking more about how I felt about her. And I know we're obviously going to get into this untold stuff, but I was all mixed up going through this research. It's a lot of highs and lows, man. Even in one interview, I go from being like, that rubbed me the wrong way to like, God, I feel bad for her. So I've never been more conflicted. I was trying to think if there's been an episode we've done in the last year and a half where I've been more conflicted, and I'm not sure there is, because either I don't like the people, there's been the few times that's happened, or I end up becoming a huge fan. Cyborg has been weird for me. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's totally understandable, and I think I'm kind of right there with you. Though she would compete in a variety of sports, including a heptathlon.
What the hell is that?
I don't know how many events that is.
7.
7. Yeah. Okay.
So you have your hexagon, heptagon, octagon, nonagon, decagon, and then it goes on through there. But
I mean,
who knew Zach was a math whiz?
No, it's not even a math whiz. It's just like, I don't know. I was really good at shapes, so
you're playing with blocks with your
Listen,
daughter.
You know
exactly.
Is. You know, like the shapes that you put in, and like it's got it. Like I love it.
It's got to fit in the right hole,
right one. Even though you can put the circle into the square one, it can't go in that one. It just can't. It can't do it.
Can we talk about handball? Have you seen handball at all?
Yeah. So handball was really like where she ended up excelling, and she becomes a professional in the sport as a teenager. I didn't really know much at all about handball. You know what I thought handball was? I thought handball was when you take a almost like a racquetball and you like throw it off a wall.
Yeah.
I thought that's what handball. That's like old school Brooklyn handball, right?
I mean, we called it wall ball, I guess, because handball was a thing. But I didn't know about handball until about 2 years ago, and somebody it was their passion, handball, and I was like, what? That's a thing? And to hear that it's like she was a national level player.
But it's not the same as what I just described.
No. Oh yeah. No.
I watched some clips. Did you watch it?
Yeah, where she's like, you run up to like a line and jump and throw the ball into a net.
It's like water polo, but on
actually, that's a good way. Water polo on land.
Because for me, it looked like I was probably watching the wrong thing, but it was like some combination of soccer and like basketball where they could like dribble. Is that right? Was that what you were watching? They can like dribble and pass it, and then you got to throw it into the net, and there's like a goalie.
Yes.
So it was like soccer and basketball, sort of.
It looks like
with ultimate frisbee and
lacrosse.
Lacrosse. Like
we're just, if you name every sport, we're gonna be
gonna get it. Yeah.
Football. No, but we'll sound smart eventually, right, guys? No, I mean I will say this. As soon as I saw it, I could see her being a beast with her athleticism. When I watched it, I was like, oh, yeah, she's probably fucking awesome. It makes sense.
Probably got a fucking cannon, too.
Oh, yeah, big time.
Well, and the one thing we'll see, I mean, we see it with all the people we profile on here, but she has extreme discipline and commitment to handball. Like, she was fully expecting that to be her life's path. So she put everything into it, and you know now what she puts into mixed martial arts. So it's not just her size, but her intensity and dedication to it. You got to imagine she was crazy good at handball. So then at 19, while studying physical education at the university, she was approached by George Karam, who invited her to train at the Shoot Box Academy. And I hope I said George's name right, because it's hard to hear her say George Karam.
And he wouldn't let it go, right? Did he keep bothering her? She wasn't interested in all, and he wouldn't let it go.
I think he gave her his business card, and then kept coming back and kept pushing her and asking her if she would. Said you have the potential to be a really good Muay Thai athlete, but she didn't want anything to do with fighting. But then she does finally go and check it out.
You think about us look at Cyborg now without fighting. I can't unsee that. I can't unsee her fighting. It's crazy.
That's what's weird.
I think she didn't want to do it.
I was thinking about that too for her parents, because I know her mom wasn't very into the idea of her becoming a fighter. You're if you're her parents, do you look back on that moment now? Let's say just in the end, and are you happy he introduced her to Shoot Box, or are you upset because she's made a living out of it and she's a legend, but at what cost and everything that comes with it down the line?
Well, I guess, it depends. As a parent, I don't know how much we'll get into this, but the weight cuts, watching her do that, as a parent, you probably don't like it. But I mean, she is probably helping her parents and providing for them. So you got to be appreciative of what you got. So,
man, I do want to talk a little bit about, even now watching the the one documentary and then the one brief interview, it's just crazy how you think. And we know, we've watched the sport for a long time. We know fighters don't get paid as much as they deserve to be paid. But you think, well, Cris Cyborg at this point must have just tons of money. But then you see she's buying a 2-bedroom house finally in California.
Yeah.
And I know it's expensive to live in California and to own a house there, but it's very humble.
Yeah.
Where she's at right now. She's not living in some giant mansion.
And she's at the top of the game.
I know,
too.
that's the thing, is that she's she's the top female in the world, and she has to celebrate when she gets approved to buy the 2-bedroom house. And you're like, really? Again, some of the problems with this sport, that can't be the case.
Can we talk a little bit about Shoot Box? And Zach, how much do you know about this? Is actually a good question for you because you're somewhat newer to the sport. Do you know that?
I've heard a lot about it. I've heard the name tossed around, but I don't know necessarily.
Do you know
much.
any of the guys that came out of Shoot Box? There's been some
big names,
names coming out of there.
No, I can't.
It's the who's who of Brazilian fighting.
For some reason, I should know this, but my brain the last couple of months. For some reason, I feel. Did Shamrock come from Shoot Box? Or what did he do?
That's Lion's Den. That's son
Lion's
of a bitch.
Den, yeah.
Still...
There's one that he did.
The greatest fighter of all time came from there. So
we're still doing these shout outs on the podcast. They haven't disappeared.
I will find a way to squeeze Anderson Silva into every podcast we do. Don't you worry.
I mean, I know what you're getting for, but the very first two that come to mind are always Vanderlei and Shogun.
Yes,
are the two legends right off the bat. But
gotcha.
Shootbox is so infamous because they're known, they sparred all the time, scary sparring, knocking each other out constantly. And they're one of those, you'll look back on it and say it never should have been like that. That was a huge mistake. And as their chins go over time, Vanderlei
you see why. Yeah.
You see why you shouldn't be doing that.
But so, go ahead.
This is why I got shoot fighting.
Oh, that
Ken
was a
Shamrock.
style of fighting. Yeah.
Shoot boxing is it's shoot. Fighting is shoot, bang, bang. Shoot is parachute.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Oh, okay. That's why I was confused. Gotcha. See?
But what's crazy about this?
Completely idiot.
This was Murderer's Row in Brazil for Muay Thai, and Cris Cyborg was the first female in that gym to train consistently, to be accepted by everyone in there. And then you hear guys like Vanderlei and Anderson talk about her, and holy cow! She's hanging with the guys.
That's scary. That all scares me too. What did those sparring sessions look like? God, that's fucked up. That she could hang with them. Some of those sparring clips, man. Shit, even when she's wrestling with Tito and stuff, just seeing that, she's crazy, man. Picking him up when did you see the clip
where she
he
picks
triangles
him
her
up.
and she picks him up? I'm like, hey, That's why my number might go up from 50,000.
Yeah, I'm regretting that 10,000 right now.
Yeah.
But see, why doesn't everyone talked about it with Ronda, but you'll never see anybody mention it again about her fighting a man. Like, you see videos of her doing these things to grown men. And, Ronda, they had judo. Like, yeah, she can spar with them, but she's not, like, striking, going all out like Cris does. Why does nobody talk about that now? Is it because of the times and how they've changed?
I think you're right.
Or is it, like, do they realize that, a man and a woman are much different? Like, I don't know. I don't. Like,
no, I think you're onto something. I think it's the times. Because I think if she continues to dismantle people, it's the logical thing that, like, First Take and all those bullshit shows would do, is run with that again.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just something we should never see because it doesn't benefit anyone involved. If she fights a guy and wins, holy cow, that's so embarrassing for him. And
if she loses, it's like, wow, a guy beat her.
Yeah.
Like,
so
he looks like a douche. Yeah.
And you know what? She doesn't need to because she's destroying everyone else. And that's really all she needs to do. And by the way, so at Shootbox is where she meets Evangelista Cyborg and where she gets her nickname from. And so they end up getting married.
Who?
Did I say his name wrong?
No.
Oh.
I didn't know that was,
Yeah,
I know who he is.
Her husband?
I didn't know that was, what's his first name?
Evangelista.
Evangelista.
I think I said that right.
I've never even heard of that.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
He was okay. I mean,
No, I know who he is, but he's the one that got his skull
just
completely crushed.
It was MVP's Pokemon
The knee,
celebration,
yeah,
right? And all
exactly,
that shit?
yeah.
Oof. Yeah.
But, so she got the nickname from him?
Yeah, and then just carried it with her.
See, I thought they were just two people with the same nickname. I didn't even know they were
husband and wife. Yeah.
Look at that.
It is one of those things where when you find out how she got it, you're like, oh, well, it takes away from it a tiny bit. Because I was like, oh, shit, they call her Cyborg. Like, what's technically kind of her last name? You're like, oh, what? God damn it.
Yeah, it's not as exciting when you find out. But we needed to tell it. So with only enough money at that time to take the public bus to school, Cris was forced to ride her bike to train at the academy. But much like her coaches, Cris believed in herself. And 1 year later, she was accepting her first pro fight, a fight she would lose after dislocating her elbow. But as we said at the top of the show, this would be her only loss to date. So her very first fight, she loses.
Sometimes I think about that woman, like those people that do that, and like all these years later, this person, I don't know her name, but she's just like, see that, honey? When Cyborg's on the main event, I beat her. Just like legend status and stuff.
Mad Hamill.
Yeah. I beat John Jones, exactly.
The guy who beat Jose Aldo lost his very first fight, I believe.
There you go.
I think he was another one who
loses his
first fight and goes on this crazy. Yep, Renan Barão. A lot of those Brazilians, weirdly enough. So anyway, Cyborg would bounce back from this loss with 7 consecutive wins, 5 of them by knockout. And with 2 wins under Elite XC and 1 with Strikeforce, the name Cris Cyborg was beginning to make the rounds among MMA fans. And soon, the fans were calling for a fight between Cris Cyborg and the top female fighter of the time, Gina Carano.
Yeah, so you got to remember Elite XC goes down. It was the Kimbo epic. Kimbo was basically holding that shit up, and then he gets knocked out by Petrozelli in the late injury. That's a whole untold in itself. But they crumble because they were, that's why promotions can't be based on one person. That's what happened with Affliction with Fedor. If you're based on one person, you're fucked. You know what I mean? But no, so it goes under. And I can't remember if Strikeforce, I feel like Strikeforce took on a lot of the contracts, but I know they go over to Strikeforce, and immediately that's when Coker gets his hands on it and is like, oh, we're making this fight immediately because that's a big money fight. Because that was the first time women's MMA was truly on everyone's radar. Even heading into this fight, this is the thing where when we're getting together, hanging out, people are talking about Gina Carano all the time. And then that's where you're explaining to your friends at the bar about Cyborg and how scary she is and how unfortunate this fight's going to be.
It's really funny you say that because, yes, I mean, look, we've got to be honest. Gina Carano was a very objectively attractive female, and her popularity was insane. And look, she had the talent to back it up.
Good,
she was undefeated. She was a really good fighter, but her looks were what were mostly making her popular because over here you have Cyborg doing the same thing that Carano's doing, but she's nowhere near the star. But then they get paired together, they get the main event slot, and they make history. But the true fans knew kind of what was going to happen going into that fight.
You know, I'm just thinking on the side right now, and I'm going to get fucking crucified for this, but whatever. Do you think, remember a couple of years ago, there was an April Fool's joke that they had booked Gina Carano Ronda, that she was going to come back and fight her, and it made the rounds, and everyone freaked out, and it was an April Fool's bullshit thing. Do you think, because in that period of time, Ronda was starting to stand with people, do you think Gina actually had a shot? Because it was going to be on the feet, because Ronda started being sold on herself just being a striker, considering herself, like, I think Edmund said she could hang with, like, Triple G. So God, bless his heart. It's the best. Oh, man. But no, I just wonder, that fight might have been better than we thought, because Ronda...
Can I just stop you right there? You know what's awesome about Edmund? Edmund is a guy in the business. He is a professional trainer. And when he makes comments like that, it gives every other dumbass sitting on their couch who's making similar comments a pass. Because fans will make comments like that. It's like, dude, you have no idea what you're talking about. Outrageous claim. But when an MMA trainer is making those comments, there's nothing a fan can say that would be more ignorant than Ronda Rousey can take Triple G.
That is outrageous. God bless his heart. Head movement. No, but that just in general, that fight might have been a little more interesting than we thought. Look, if Ronda tried to take her down, forget about it. It's going down immediately. But she got really obsessed with her striking.
Well, I may be jumping a little ahead here, but two things that we should say. Speaking of Ronda Rousey was not competing at all at the time these two fight. So if you're newer to this sport and you think Ronda Rousey was the original female fighter to put women's MMA on the map, she was the one to take it to the next level, and she gets all the credit due because she deserves it. But this was, again, the first women's main event. It was not inside the UFC, but it was a historic thing because women had never fought at this point in a main event slot. And it was a big pay-per-view. It did a lot of money. Now, as to your question, I don't think it's that crazy because I went back and watched the Cyborg Carano fight. I remember it as Gina just getting completely smashed and dismantled. I had forgotten that she hangs in there. She does okay.
I've never had the heart to rewatch it, to be totally honest. That was a really rough night.
He's still picking up the pieces from that night.
That was a tough night. But I do think you're right, because I feel like I remember having that little bit of hope and then just getting crushed. Like, because it was an ass whipping after that beginning.
Don't get me wrong. Yeah, I mean, she won 4 minutes, 59 seconds in the first round. So she finished the fight with 1 second to go in the first round. So she still finished her inside of one round. But there was some back and forth exchange. It wasn't like she went in and just smashed her inside of a minute. It was good.
Well,
it was an entertaining fight.
And that fight right there is sort of a microcosm for Dana's entire argument against, because a big thing here is going to be how the UFC is going to promote her and difficult to work with. But Dana's argument was always like, people aren't going to want to see women get beat up on their screen. At the bars, you don't want to see that going on in the background. Well, this is a nightmare when you have someone like Cyborg who's intimidating everyone and they're fighting Gina Carano, who everyone has a huge crush on. That's everyone's worst nightmare, if you're just being totally honest about it. And I think that right there showed, if anything, that might have stalled the UFC on wanting to bring it in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's an absolute reality. And I think that's 100% the case. So Cyborg would defend her belt twice the following year. Then in March of 2011, the UFC announced that they had purchased Strikeforce.
Boo.
No, that's great news, right?
Sorry, it still breaks my heart.
Yeah, no. It's not such great news for Cyborg.
I heart Strikeforce.
Exactly. So for Cyborg, a year later, in her third title defense, she tests positive for Stanozol.
Here we go.
Stanozol. And she receives a 1-year suspension. And by the time her suspension is up, the women's 145-pound division no longer exists.
Well, here we go. So I don't know why you're bringing this up, Taylor, because she was just trying to lose weight and got it from somebody at church, right? Isn't that what she said? I mean, that's got to be the answer, right? Listen, fighters, fuck. At some point, one person besides Chael, somebody besides Chael has got to be like, you know what? Busted. You got me. You're right. I used fucking steroids to get bigger.
Yeah.
Not, I was trying to lose weight and somebody at church gave me these. I wanted to throw my goddamn phone into a pond when I watched that video.
So that's interesting to me because I saw that and I was like, oh, okay. I'm not sure if I buy it, but it fit the timeline because that was around the time she did start going to church and start changing her faith. And she did say, yeah, I made a mistake. I took it. I guess what was different about that than what some other people try to do is they say, I didn't know at all. I wasn't taking anything.
It's the same excuse Anderson used, though. Anderson was like, this guy.
Anderson's was even worse. that was even worse. I think it's just more when you get to John Jones and certain other guys being like, I haven't touched any foreign substance. I think at least she said, I messed up. I shouldn't have taken it. And it was in my system. I am responsible for it. But I know what you're saying. She didn't admit to taking it for a competitive advantage. But my question is, does she need to take that for a competitive advantage?
Here's where I'm fucking irritated, though, dude, because go look at a picture of her physique when she's younger in the beginning of her career. When she's fighting in MMA, she looks like a totally different person.
Now she's yoked.
But then she starts taking these anabolic steroids to cut weight, which is the first person to ever. It was an anabolic steroid, isn't it?
Correct.
Which everyone uses to add mass, but she used it to quote unquote air quotes here lose weight, and yet she wants us to buy that. She wants us to look back on that because she asks for forgiveness all the time. She's like, "Oh, it was an honest mistake. Somebody at church gave it to me." It's like, look, lady, you added a ton of mass. You look like a totally different person.
I mean, it's the Barry Bonds effect.
And it is, and that's totally fair too.
Barry Bonds, early in his career, you could tell just by looking at his head, like it looked like a little pea, and now it's a watermelon. Like just the sheer mass that he gained. And
I would rather you take a Vitor approach and just try to keep it. Mum's the word. I use TRT because they let me. Vitor drives me crazy too, but this. Somebody in church gave me some pills to help lose weight. Come the fuck. And hey, like they say, at the very least, she's being negligent. And we hold that against John Jones, so we got to hold it against her too.
Absolutely.
But
100%.
In my honest opinion, there's way more to it. I think it's just a straight up metabolic steroid she was using to get mass.
And this was 2011. So this was what, pre-USADA?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They came on the scene much later.
Yep.
So to get busted back then,
that's that intelligence test.
I mean, there was a lot of it in her system for her to get busted, which again makes you think if you could easily hide it and she was taking it knowingly, how come she couldn't hide that?
Well, right. Okay. Just, and a side note, I'm sorry to go on a different tangent here, but like during the documentary, when her boyfriend talks about this suspension, he kind of, in a very sympathetic light, he's like, imagine being her living in San Diego. You've got to pay these bills with no money for a year. And that is where I start to go crazy because I'm like, ma'am, you cheated. You know what I mean? If you break a rule at your job, if somebody works at a grocery store and they steal and they get suspended for a year, I don't feel bad you can't pay your bills. You fucking stole. You cheated. And you whether you used it to lose weight or gain mass, you cheated and you admitted you cheated. I'm sorry you couldn't pay your... Look, I want everybody to be able to pay their bills, but I'm not going to feel bad for you if you caused this.
Well, you make the bed, you lie in it, basically. Yeah. Like, you can't complain about misfortunes if you're the reason your misfortune. Like, you just can't do that.
Straight up her fault, 100%.
Yeah.
Well, it proved to be the most costly mistake of her career, and it would have catastrophic repercussions because not only would the UFC fold her division, but her name and legacy would be marred forever. Add to that a separation from her husband, and it's hard to see how things could get much worse for Cyborg, and yet they would. See, while all of this was going on, Ronda Rousey was rising, winning her first title fight with Strikeforce, and soon the spotlight in women's MMA had shifted from Cyborg to Rousey. Now it was Ronda who was being touted as the best female fighter in the world. And as for Cyborg, well, she was nothing but a cheater.
Well, and this is that thing, right? If it's almost like our Tito episode, sweet irony, her manager, Tito episode, where the promotion has realized there's a better star. They were all in on Tito. They were behind Tito, and they've realized Chuck was actually the true star. And they're like, Tito, get the fuck out of here. We got to make this fight happen and get him to the side. I think in this case, look, Cyborg was at the time, she's on that little run there with Strikeforce and everything. She's the best option. And you're realizing, like, do you build her up like a Mike Tyson? What do you do with her? Do you just go with the intimidating bad guy route who, pay $60 to see her massacre somebody? But that time on the sidelines, it's the old injured player where somebody comes in and takes your spot. People realize there's the Rousey alternative. So now she comes in, takes over the UFC, and what's Dana going to do? What they've done forever. They're going to protect their star. Mm-hmm. So Cyborg gets buried.
I mean, like you said, it happens in all sports. Like, I think in the NFL, Alex Smith was 8-2 or something like that. Broke his hand. Colin Kaepernick comes in and then wins like 10 games straight, goes to the Super Bowl, and Alex Smith is no longer in San Francisco anymore.
Isn't that the infamous?
It's crazy.
Like, isn't that how like Bledsoe's career ended with the Patriots? He gets
with
hurt.
Tom Brady
steps in. It's like boom,
that's it.
Never again. And now, granted, I think he went to the Cowboys.
He got traded, but
that's it.
It's never the same.
So this is kind of a MMA's version of that. She's out for a year, and it's forget about it. Boom, Rousey's our girl.
That one mistake. I mean, that cost her because Rousey goes on to be the first headliner in women's MMA for the UFC, which is bigger than what Cyborg did with Carano, even though that was so big at the time. I mean, Rousey just supersedes that times a million when she comes on, and that should have been Cyborg's spot.
Yeah.
And to add to that, Cyborg and Rousey should have met. They should have fought. But like you said, the UFC is going to do their best to protect Rousey, and they're going to throw mud on Cyborg's name because they're not interested in her. She's failed a drug test. She's not marketable in the appearance department. So they don't want any part of her.
I think at that time, we did a QD, was it about a year ago? We talked about women's MMA. It was pretty early on, a lot about the whole Barbie killer thing for Nunes and all that stuff. And I think at that point in time, they had zero interest in her at all. So they said all sorts of mean shit, man. Really mean stuff.
And to go back, like, to having no part of Cyborg, they really didn't. Because think about this really quick. Ronda was at the top of her game. She was 135. She's champion. She's beaten everybody. Their number one excuse was, well, I'm the champion. She needs to come to me. I'm not going to go to her. So they're like, oh, let's make her cut this weight. She gets it to 140. But think about everybody's goal right now to be double champ. They want to be a champ in 2 divisions. Why wouldn't they want their star to be a champ in 2 divisions? Is because I'm not going to say scared, whatnot, but they knew that this was a problem.
Oh, yeah. I think they absolutely knew what was going to happen, and they were doing everything they could to prevent it. I think everybody on the planet knows Cyborg can't make 135. Hell, she tries.
She tried to make 140.
Before
they made 145.
Can we just talk about that
video?
The weight cut?
We're going to get to there in 1 second because I want to bring us up to that part because, Ronda's in, Cyborg's out, and it would be 5 years and 5 wins in Invicta before Cyborg would finally even make it to the UFC. So she has to fight 5 more times after they acquire Strikeforce when she should have just been automatically in, fighting in a headline bout. She's got to go fight in Invicta 5 times before they even invite her over. So at UFC 198 in Curitiba, Brazil, she would finally make her debut in her hometown. But the UFC and President Dana White didn't seem to be any more interested in that time in pushing Cyborg as the next big star. In fact, some would say they looked for every opportunity to squander her success by standing by their decision to not have a 145-pound weight class. And like you alluded to, they knew she couldn't cut down to 135. So they were essentially saying, you can just fight at catch weights at 140, but you will never be able to hold a title. And for a fighter to never be able to have a chance at a belt, I mean, that's crazy.
Well, she credits, Cyborg herself credits McGregor Diaz 1 as sort of being the reason she's around in the UFC, because the UFC saw that a catchweight fight can sell. And I think then they knew, well, hey, we can do a catchweight fight for her, which it blows my mind why if we're going to do a fight not for a belt with her, why don't we just make it 145? This doesn't make any fucking sense. There's a whole stable.
Make more money.
They don't make any fucking sense. And they're so petty sometimes, it's ridiculous. Because, again, they've backed so many people with PED violations in the past, and they shit on her because, again, the golden goose was Ronda, and she was a real threat to it. And it's a shame when you see what she had to do as she tries to do shit like this. If the weight cut to 140 looked like it did, what did her attempt at 135? Because she says she tried.
Yeah.
Like she wanted to try it out, and she couldn't do it. What did that look like?
And that's where I start to shift. Whereas like, yeah, you got caught, and like we have you have like your PED users in one area, you have your non, but they're not so great, and then you have like the great who've never used them and who are at the top of the game. This is where I start to move her like kind of towards like you're great. I'm obviously she's cheated. She has. So she'll still always have that underneath her. But watching that video of her trying to lose, what was it? 1.5 pounds? Like to get to
the final
push.
Because she starts,
she starts super high, but the final push, watching that, it was cringeworthy. I couldn't watch it, and I was surprised that they still aired it because of how, like, this is what she goes through, and I start to feel bad because this is how bad she wants this. She's literally killing herself to get to a weight so she can fight at catch weight. It's not, you're just egotistical, like to not make a 145-pound weight division.
When Perillo, I think it's Perillo that intros that part of it and basically says like, this is weird because right now you basically watch someone come as close as possible to death, basically. And when you see that start, it's kind of creepy, and it just, man, does it deteriorate. And like first it starts off like any typical weight cut, but by the end of that, she is a mess. Crying, she's like a skeleton, she can hardly walk, she's just breaking down, and I'm like, what the fuck sport are we watching sometimes?
And then
what is the point?
Then you look at it, right, and look how she performed.
Yeah.
Finish.
Yep.
Can you
what would she look like?
Exactly. Like, so they make that 145-pound weight, and she's just tearing people apart. So it's like, man, the passion she has and just how good she actually is to go through that weight cut and actually be dominant like she is, that's what kind of separates her from like a John Jones cheater for me.
Well, John Jones, there's a lot of debate how much of it is genetic and how much is it is hard work. And that's, multiple fights where he's put in 2 or 3 sessions in the gym, whatever. Look, I have a lot of problems with Cyborg's PED use and cheating, but there's no denying she works as hard as anybody. And they say she's a huge gym rat, like nonstop. Even when I think it was her ex was going to the gym or whatever, and she wasn't even supposed to work out, or I don't know if it was her boyfriend, but she would put in a session at the gym, even when she was not even supposed to be there. So she's got it. Those weight cuts, seeing that weight cut, she's got the work ethic. So I think, Taylor, what you were getting at earlier, actually, and your Barry Bonds analogy is just as good. It kind of all ties together because Barry Bonds was a Hall of Famer before he cheated, which he never got caught, but we all know what was going on. Did he need to? Well, he became statistically the greatest baseball player of all time. And look, Cyborg, there's a lot of similarities there. But look, back to the original point, no doubt about it. Her work ethic's fucking crazy.
I wanna save my commentary on her weight cuts because I actually have a weird take on her weight cuts. I came away with something that I hadn't seen until watching that video again. And specifically something Perillo, or maybe it was Lockhart, specifically something that they say that made me sort of change my perception on those weight cuts from good to maybe not so good. So I'll get to that in our takeaways, but despite the obstacles before her, Cyborg continued to do what she does best, win, and win in a way that causes those watching to take notice. So unable to resist any longer, the UFC announced they would create the women's 145-pound division. There was just one problem. After waiting for so long, Cris Cyborg would not be the first one fighting for the belt.
So am I remembering this correctly? They announced the division, and then they wanted to do the fight in February because this is the start of this modern era of the UFC where we just do anything we can to fill a pay-per-view slot, and it's a fucking shit show every single month.
February 8th. I remember the date because I was pissed off about it.
And they try to force her to come back early, and her doctors are flat out like, nope, you cannot do that weight cut again. And going back to that cut we just talked about, I absolutely believe it. She should not be doing that back-to-back or anything close to that. So she's like, no, I can't do it yet. I think she wanted a month or two to rest up.
Yeah, she just asked for an extension.
Yeah,
a little more time.
And they announced the Durandamy home, and in the meantime, this is when she pops again, right? I think it's right around this era.
Yes, but that gets revoked, right? That gets taken back.
Yeah. It does, but she got the therapeutic use exemption for that. Look, they find their way to wiggle out of these. John Jones wiggles out of every one of them. Always gets it reduced.
Sure.
We can't play favorites. She's got a history.
This is, to me, one of the ultimate, like, fuck yous. Like, you have Holly Holm, who has lost 2 straight, I believe, at this point, and, you know, lost a belt, lost to Shevchenko, and is now fighting for the 145-pound belt against Jermaine Durandamy. Like, who? I didn't even know who the hell she was.
Yeah, train wreck.
And that fight, we're going in like, okay, I don't even know who Jermaine is, but like Holly Holm should win. And then we see like some stuff going on in the fight that is like, okay, well, that's questionable. Hits after the bell and everything. But it's an ultimate FU to Cyborg because she is the reason that they have anybody in that weight class. She's the sole reason they have a weight class for her. That's it.
Sometimes I think they can promote, and sometimes I think they have no idea what they're doing. I don't know how you do that.
Well, throwing the PED stuff out and then throwing the actual fight between Holly Holm and GDR, I think what's important to see here is this is just an extension of what they had done up to this point, because even though they create this division, they still somehow, they know Cyborg is cutting a ton of weight, and they know that she shouldn't be cutting weight that quickly after her last fight. And yet, again, they're more concerned with filling a card than they are with someone who's got 18 wins at that point and who is the face of 145 pounds. They would rather just fill the card than give her the shot at 145 pounds like she deserves. I mean, she'd been waiting for how long? Her entire career for that moment. Mm-hmm. And they're like, yeah, no, we'll just pull somebody else in. They did it knowingly. You know, they knew. It's almost like the UFC sometimes will test fighters, but they'll only test the ones they don't like. Like, how much are you willing to step up, take a last minute fight, whatever it is?
That one I just don't get. Like, I understand all the shit talking we did before where they were trying to keep her away from Rousey. But at this point, it's all all over. Timeline wise, Rousey's lost the belt, right? I mean,
yep.
I'm sorry if I'm fucking that up.
No, yeah.
She's lost the belt.
Gone.
So
and she's out of the UFC.
Yeah, you're looking for anything you can to be a draw, and now you're putting the belt on somebody that ends up flat out refusing to fight Cyborg because she's a quote unquote known cheater. It's like, nice work, guys. For what?
And that's the thing. Like, Holly Holm, she's one of my favorite fighters, and I'll defend her performances. No, like, that's what you do. But I was not excited for that fight, for that belt, because it wasn't Cyborg. And I'm not a huge Cyborg fan. It's just, I didn't even want to watch one of my favorite fighters fight for it because I knew she didn't belong there. It wasn't hers to win. It was Cyborg's. Like, it was just the unfairness of it.
This era, it's going to be a major black eye on this era. This whole bullshit with interim titles, and that was another just bullshit thing, and it buries divisions. Look, they're, again, sorry to date the podcast, but we're about to do Shevchenko, Joanna, and to try to restart that division with the belt, and they're almost just trying to prop up whoever they want up there and kickstart it because they botched the start of this one too.
I mean, Joanna doesn't belong there. I don't care if you're the biggest fan in the world. She's lost 2 straight.
Yep.
To a champion, no less, but she doesn't belong fighting for that belt. Oh, and she's already lost twice or 3 times to Shevchenko already.
But so they're going to this bullshit fight, carnival, freak show shit, right? They do this. We're bringing back Brock to fight Cormier. We're doing all this stuff. We're going with whatever we can to sell pay-per-views. Well, then why don't you embrace Cyborg, who the knock against her is that it's like a freak show thing, right? It's come see the big, I'm sorry, this is not my opinion, but it's come see this big scary girl beat somebody up, right? It's the Mike Tyson. She's the female Mike Tyson. Why wouldn't you embrace that and push her to the moon? there's not enough people to put around her. Bring anybody out. Sell me on them. Make me care about the opponent. Shit, back in the day, they made me care about Daniel Cormier versus Patrick Cummins. Just tell me a story, okay?
Yep.
If you don't think his or her opponents are good, I don't care. Make me care about them. I'll watch. I'll pay for
Tyson's the perfect example because none of his opponents deserved to be in the ring. Tyson wasn't the greatest boxer of all time, but against the guys he was fighting, he absolutely was.
It makes you wonder. I don't know. I'm literally just thinking of anything I can right now. There's always the rumors that is she difficult to work with behind the scenes? Is this just a straight up personal vendetta at this point? Because there's no reason they wouldn't.
It may be. I mean, Tito said, she was hard to work with. I think Brian Stan even said something in an article that she was very difficult to work with. Obviously Dana, but you can't take him at his word anymore. But yeah, I imagine she's probably a little bit difficult to work with. But there's a lot of stars in the UFC who are as well that they don't treat this way. So there is something personal there.
Good point on that.
But because GDR vacated the title, they really couldn't deny Cyborg the opportunity to fight for it at that point. So she finally gets her opportunity at the belt at UFC 214. Her opponent's Tanya Evinger. And Tanya was a game adversary. Like, she really was. She stood toe-to-toe with Cyborg and gave it her all, but Cyborg would ultimately finish the fight in the third round. She would win the belt that she had worked her entire career to get, and what followed was more than she could have hoped for. Like, it almost, this is the turning point in her career. Just getting that belt.
Oh, sure. And just a quick note on that fight, to my point a few minutes ago, they built that up. The media, the MMA media built that up. Like, they said, hey, a lot of people don't know who Evinger is, but they're like, she's like, I remember the exact phrase. She's like a female Diaz. And the minute you hear that, you're like, I want to see this.
Yep.
I want to see this. Like,
I had no idea who she was.
You know what I mean? And all it takes, just sell us on the opponent. If you don't think, which you should be able to sell us on Cyborg, but if you can't, look at that. And we were in on that. And we're like, as soon as she withstood the first round, we're like, God, look at how tough she is. She is sort of like a Diaz.
Then the second round.
Yeah.
And then even I think it went kind of deep into the third round before she finished it. And I was happy. We all knew, you can't say you knew, I guess, but we all had this feeling that Cyborg, she's going to win it. But there was, for some reason, the way they sold it is the way you should, is that there was, after that first round, there was like, holy shit, can she go 5 rounds and maybe outpoint her? Now, she lost those rounds.
Oh, yeah.
Let's not get it twisted. She lost them. But there's always this thought, like, nobody's made it out of the first round with her, and all of a sudden now someone is.
Well, and you always wonder with Cyborg, the cardio, you just always wonder, like, hey, take her 4 or 5 rounds. What if she wears down? Like, Connor seems to completely fall apart after round 3.
Yeah.
Maybe earlier, I'm being generous. Maybe Cyborg would do the same. But
we hadn't seen a modern Cyborg carrying around all that muscle go past 2 rounds. So, you really didn't know. She could gas and then become vulnerable in some way. So it was compelling, but it's just crazy that all throughout Cyborg's story, once she really starts getting on a roll and once she really becomes Cris Cyborg, basically after the Gina Carano fight, you just feel like Cyborg is the uncrowned champion. She will be in the UFC. She will win the belt, and she will be the champ for a long, long time. And it takes her ups and downs and PED use and all these kind of things, and she finally gets the belt. And I gotta imagine she hadn't been making a whole lot of money because she was on fight night cards. The UFC did not care for her, but she finally wins this belt, and the floodgates open, because then she gets Holly Holm in a major, major fight, and then now she's in a super fight.
Oh, yeah. Well, look at the Holly fight. I mean, I want to say that card wasn't even that great, and it did a couple, maybe 200,000 or 300,000 buys. I don't have the number in front of me, but in this era, that's big. Really, she's a bona fide draw, okay? And again, I just hope they realize the mistake they've been making all these years.
About that fight, like, it was one of those, that's where she shifted, and we saw her go 5 rounds, and she was not tired. She was still throwing her. You know what I think it was? She changed her game up. Like, she didn't attack right off the bat. She was patient. We saw it with Leslie Smith. We saw it with Tanya Evinger. We saw it with Holly Holm. Like, Yuna Ketskaya. Did I say that right?
I have no idea. That was a good effort.
Yeah,
You know what?
right.
Let's roll with
like
it.
she did
Let's
it with
do
that too, and those are all fights. Now knowing Tanya Evinger, maybe not so much, but like Holly Holm may be the exception. But those 3 fights, she could have just went in and just wrecked them. But no, she just, she stayed back. She was patient. And I think that's why she's able to go those 5 rounds. And just, you mentioned it a year ago, the women's podcast that we did last year. This fight with her and Amanda is massive. And the fact that nobody knows about it, it just goes into like the UFC and the whole looks thing. Like these are 2 killers that are going. This is a super fight. This is one great fighter in Cyborg who has shown so much power and determination and everything. And then you have a young lioness, no pun intended. They're both killers and strikers, and they're going at it, and it's not being sold the way it should be, I think.
Just to your point here, somehow this super fight is the co-main event. It's completely overshadowed by John Jones Gustafsson, completely. And this is in an era where right now, just a few weeks later, they are desperately struggling to fill like an ESPN Plus main event. Not that this would be on ESPN Plus, but please don't do this, MMA gods. But maybe you move this fight to the main event of that January pay-per-view that they just moved Dillashaw Cejudo off of, okay? Because this should be its own main event. This should be the story, because there may not be a women's MMA fight this big for 5 years, 6 years. Who knows? Ever.
I 100% agree, except for the fact that I like that John Jones is going to draw a lot of money, and I think it's going to put money in both of their pockets.
That's a good point.
And in today's landscape, even though her and Amanda would be a draw, you would be worried that maybe it wouldn't be the draw it should be. Because like you're saying, it's not the super fight that we know it is, but the general public doesn't understand the gravity of that fight. So maybe the pay-per-view numbers wouldn't be there if they weren't a co-main event. So I'm just happy she's going to be
that's fair.
making some money on this card.
She's been compensated for sure.
And like you said, the eyes on her. I mean,
look, this is important.
Well, sometimes it never works. They tried it with Joanna. I feel like Joanna was on a lot of like Connor cards and a lot of big time cards, and she just never really got that mainstream crossover. It just never worked.
It started to happen towards the end, and then she loses.
But that doesn't mean what they're doing is wrong. It's the right technique. Sometimes it just, maybe somebody doesn't have like that it factor, okay? But I think this is the right, you bring up a great point. I can't argue it at all.
So let's segue into, because that kind of wraps up her story. Let's segue into her takeaways, and specifically, I'll ask the question that you sort of pitched in the middle of the episode, Tim. What do you make of Cris Cyborg after learning more about her? Because she's a fighter that we really knew next to nothing about, and we still really don't know a ton about her besides her career. We don't have a ton of her backstory, but seeing what she goes through with the weight cuts, seeing the alcoholism, and we didn't even talk about her adopting her niece. You know, I mean, she wanted to be a mother, but obviously it's hard to have a child when you're cutting weight like that, when your focus is your career and fighting. But she's getting up there in age, and a lot of the female fighters, this is an issue. I mean, Miesha Tate leaves and finally, becomes pregnant. So this is something that she's always wanted, is to be a mother, and she ends up adopting her niece, and her niece's mother left her when she was 8 months old or something, and just completely abandons her.
Brother. It's Cyborg's brother's kid, right?
Right. And Cyborg's brother ends up moving away and starting a new family, and the child is just left with Cyborg's mom to take care of. But they form a bond together, Cyborg and her niece, and then Cyborg ends up adopting her.
Yeah, that's that stuff, again, that needs to get out there a little bit more. Just, her getting her citizenship here, getting that 2-bedroom house that she's so proud of so that she can bring her niece here and give her the life she thinks she deserves. That's pretty awesome. So that is the stuff, to your question, that makes me very conflicted. And I got to be honest, my answer might be terrible, because I've never gotten to this point in a podcast in the research and been so confused, because I think she's grossly underpromoted. I think she's been horribly mistreated by the UFC. I think it's an awesome story, and she's probably the best female fighter of all time. And I don't know. My gut tells me the biggest issue here is she's ahead of her time. There's not enough competition for her. It's sort of like Ronda was like a little bit ahead of the curve, but Ronda had that appeal, right? She had the look. The mainstream picked up on her. Cyborg, the UFC's done her no favors. It's not working. I think she's a little bit ahead of her time, but every time I start to like kind of feel bad, like I was saying, I see some clips and I see how difficult she can be to work with. And I see some of the ways she talks to like a Tito or the things I think like you said, the Brian Stan thing. I to be honest, I don't remember the specifics of the Stan thing, but I absolutely remember he took issue with her and said she was tough to deal with. I hear stuff like that. And ultimately, the PED thing's hard to get away from.
Especially coming from Brian Stan. We love Tito
like
Ortiz, but like hearing Tito say she's difficult to work with, that's
But you know what? When you watch those clips of Tito and Cyborg, I think he's being a good coach.
That's true.
Like he's like, hey, we got to do this. We got to wrestle. And I'm like, and she said that in the weight cutting moments, he's kind of the last one to come in and be like cold blooded and say, we got to get this done. And I'm like, to me, look, I don't want her to kill herself with cutting weight, but if you need a coach, that's what you're paying your coach for, right? To get it done. So he's doing his job.
So it's more of a difficult thing of putting in like the extra time. It's not a money thing.
She is difficult in the sense that, at least what I gathered from those clips, is that she's a little bit hard-headed and stubborn. And I think, I'm not about to say because she's female, but I think she has a lot of emotion. She is very sensitive, and I think that's fair to say, and I think she would admit that. For somebody who is a killer, she also has a sensitive side. She, again, adopting her niece, she's crying during the weight cut. She cries after a win. She's an emotional person, and that is okay. But I think that adrenaline, that competitive nature, and that emotion mixed together makes for a really tough person to reason with. And Tito, in the one clip, shows up 3 weeks before her fight, and she's pissed that he wasn't there sooner because Lockhart was before. But honestly, man, she would do terrible in a Greg Jackson camp because, I don't think he's there a month before working every single day with you one-on-one. It seems like Tito was doing his job well, but she took issue with it.
So the one thing that I'll do is to defend, just from what I've learned through this podcast, is defend her a little bit. Being difficult, like what she's gone through, and then look at what she has. Like you said, like that 2-bedroom house means everything to her. And she's adopting she adopted her niece, and what she's gone through, like weight cuts and everything. Like sometimes, how humble she is and how that makes her feel becoming a U.S. citizen. We know somebody mutually that he's working on becoming a U.S. citizen. It is so hard. That test, he was asking me questions. I don't deserve to be a U.S. citizen because I don't know the answers to it.
Listen, let's be real. 85% of Americans could not pass a citizenship test.
So I think the stuff that she has gone, I'm not saying she gets a pass for being difficult, but the stuff that she's gone through, I think she, in some way, she has a right to be like, okay, maybe I don't want to do that. Like I don't know. But that's that determination she has. Like, she's going to do it regardless. Maybe you just have to push her a little harder.
And hey, man, she hasn't gotten a fair shake at all. Not even just the promotional stuff. But listen, in this era where everybody's hypersensitive and stuff, we make a lot of jokes about what you can and can't say. There has been shit said about Cyborg by her boss, Dana White, the announcer, Joe Rogan, who we love Joe Rogan, but the comments about her being Vanderlei Silva in a dress, Rogan making jokes about her having a dick, it's totally classless.
Yep.
Terrible shit that nobody should deal with in any era, like let alone in this one. So she's had to put up with that. And why does anyone, let alone the best female fighter of all time, have to listen to shit like that? Because I'm sorry to rant, but the shit Dana used to say when he would bury her with comments like that was when Dana had credibility, and that's when his word meant everything. And so at that time, there's millions of people thinking like, she's a fraud, she's just a cheater, she's a man, blah 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 blah. It's hard for people to take her seriously and come around on her, especially when they do this half-ass job promoting her now.
Well, and then I also take issue with now when he tries to talk her up. It's like, okay, you weren't saying that a couple years ago when your high horse was like on Ronda Rousey. Like, listen, man, you got to be. I get it, people change, but you can't go from making dick jokes and then all of a sudden, oh yeah, she's great, she's this and that. Like, you just can't do that, and it's all known. You can watch the
Yep.
videos of all the shit talking that happens. And like you said, we love Rogan, but like he has a job to do. He goes into the interviews and now he talks like, oh, she's the greatest women's fighter of all time. But dude, you forget 2 years ago, like the looks. And that's why we did a podcast on looks in women, because they don't get treated the way, they're good enough to be treated. Like it's crazy.
All right, so I'm going to make a comment about her weight cutting.
Okay.
Because initially when I watched that footage, obviously my heart goes out to her because that's grueling and punishing, and no person should have to go through that. And it shows you what a hard worker she is. It shows you how dedicated she is. Zach mentioned her getting her citizenship and how difficult that is. She's learning the language. She's trying. She tries in every aspect. There's no denying what a hard worker she is. But the one thing that and again, I can't remember if it's Perillo or Lockhart, but the one thing they say is, she's got to cut this weight without losing the muscle, because that's where the power is. And she's known as this knockout artist. So we can't have her lose any of the muscle. When I hear that, I know that that's true. But then I start to feel like, okay, so couldn't she just lose some of the muscle and get down to 135? And the truth is, yes, she can. I don't know nearly as much about weight cutting and fitness as someone like George Lockhart, but I do know a decent amount about cutting weight and about muscle. And yes, you can bring your glycogen levels down. You can start feeding off of your muscle, and you can burn your muscle, and it actually burns easier than fat. Cris Cyborg at 5'8" can 100% get down to 135. Now, my question is, obviously you don't want to compromise your mass and your muscle, but my question becomes, Ronda Rousey reigned for so long because of her skill set. She was ahead of her time with her skill set. Mm-hmm. You made the comment, Cris Cyborg might be ahead of her time, and she is dominating women on the feet. If Cris Cyborg was not the larger person in the octagon, the person with more muscle, say when she had fought Holly Holm, who's a better skilled athlete? Cris Cyborg or Holly Holm?
I actually still think Cris Cyborg.
And I agree with you.
Yeah.
I just want to throw that question out there because a lot is made of her size, but no one really talks about her size being the advantage in the fight. She's always more skilled, more athletic, more everything. But I wonder, just like Ronda Rousey, if she will meet her match in someone like Amanda Nunes, will her size be the difference, or will Nunes' skills trump Cyborg's, and will she get the victory?
I'm with you 100%. Like I think my biggest thing is like when there's statements like that where he's saying like, yeah, she can't lose the muscle or it's not the same person. I'm like, look, if you're looking for sympathy, you're not going to get it from me, because again, you want that advantage. You want to be the bigger person. That's where I get a little meatheadish, where I'm like, yeah, but then you do have to suffer. If you're going to fight in that division, so be it. Like, I don't think any of this should be the case. I think she should have 145, but I get it. If you want that advantage, you're going to have to pay for it. What I was getting at earlier is Ronda would have been too small for 145, right? She would have been a size mismatch, and Cyborg is too big. She can't come down to 135. I just don't think it was ever meant to be. The promoter would have never let it happen, but I just don't think it was ever meant to be. And right now, there's no one at 145 that can compete with her, so it's just like not a good fit.
I just wonder. So you made a good point there. That just to add to that, you feel sympathetic for Cyborg when she's crying and she's cutting that weight. But then you also have to realize that she is choosing that. She is choosing to not cut the weight earlier, to not cut the muscle. Mm-hmm. She's choosing to make it the most grueling weight cut possible so that she can keep her mass in her fight. Yep. That is a choice. And we have to come to terms with that.
She added that. Again, I'm sorry for saying it a second time. Go look up the pictures. We can tweet it out. She had a totally different physique early in her MMA career. She changed that. This is a choice she made.
And there's nothing wrong with having the size advantage. That is a weapon. That is something that will help her, and it's a good thing. I wouldn't deny any fighter that option if they have it, but understand that that is a choice for her to have that advantage in the octagon.
I just think, I always say to people, if you're going to bitch and moan about something, you have to offer a solution. Well, I think we kind of did it in passing earlier, but I think the solution to me is clear. You make 145 way sooner than they did, but now we have it. And you just give her the full-on Mike Tyson treatment. Like we said, give her a bunch of people. Sure, none of those people should have been in the ring with Tyson, okay? But you put those people in there with her and you give them a little story and you just make her the world beater. It works. Look, Betch Correia had no business being in a main event at a pay-per-view against Ronda. Absolute disgrace.
But
it worked. It sold. And people were excited because they made a story out of it.
Mm-hmm.
They made it
she
that
beat her
she was
training
beating
partners,
Ronda's
yeah.
teammates. They just told a goddamn story.
You know what's awesome about that example too? If you highlight the competitor's strength, like let's say they put somebody in there with Cyborg and they say she is a killer on the ground. Then Cyborg goes in there and beats her at her own game because Cyborg's a great BJJ practitioner. It looks even more impressive. So it wasn't just that Betch Correia went in with Ronda Rousey. She was the striker, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then Ronda knocks her out. It's pandemonium.
They did it with Sarah McMahon. She was like the former Olympian also. And like, ooh, what happens now? You know, they did it every time. They always found a way with Ronda mysteriously.
I have a video of me freaking out after that knockout. It was right after, it was the pay-per-view after my wedding day. It was that Saturday. And a bunch of guys just jumping up in the air. Holy shit, this is crazy. Yeah, it was nuts.
Yeah. It works.
You sell. You have to learn how to sell. I just want to apologize to a few people though.
Just this headed.
Well, it's about Cyborg.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So in my, upbringing of the UFC, I gave a few people a lot of shit that they came to me with this Cyborg bullshit, and I was like, there's no way she would ever beat Ronda Rousey. I just want to apologize and say that, I don't know if that was the case. Yeah. So,
okay,
sorry.
So in defense of your good name here, don't you think we all fell victim to that? Just like, that's what happened.
I also didn't know who she was.
But they promoted her saying shit like she could beat Triple G. They were Edmund,
once
our
in
boy,
an ever
once in an
fighter.
ever. Our
Yep.
boy Edmund saying that she's like knocking out males in the gym all the time.
Yeah.
We were sold. It was a crock of shit, man. It was fucking the old wolf tickets.
It's
thing.
that,
It was,
it's that on top of I didn't know who Cyborg was, and I was just like, you know what, you guys can all eat shit because like she's not losing. It's not happening.
I think in your head you're going, Ronda's going to throw her to the ground in 2 seconds, and then you're never going to have. But then you realized, A, Ronda probably would have tried to stand with her, and B, could she have gotten her down? I don't know.
Probably not.
We didn't even talk about that. Just like a straight up prediction. Do we all just think straight up bloodbath? Cyborg would have.
I think you would have seen something similar to what happened in the Nunes fight with Rousey.
Yeah.
And honestly, and that's partially, that's not just Nunes' skill. That's not just her skill in striking, but that's not letting Ronda get a hold of her. That's breaking those grabs. And honestly, if it had gone to the ground, Nunes is a beast on the ground.
Or Cyborg.
Well, no,
Nunes
but I'm saying
too,
if
though.
Nunes had gone on the
right,
ground
right,
with
right, I
Rousey,
gotcha.
Nunes is a beast on the ground. Cyborg is a beast on the ground. I maybe I give Ronda the advantage in jiu-jitsu, but honestly, a lot of those women she was submitting didn't hold a candle to her in that department, whereas Amanda Nunes and Cris Cyborg absolutely hold a candle to her in jiu-jitsu.
I almost wish there was an alternate timeline, like a comic book, where like we could go back and just see what it plays out like if Ronda doesn't get obsessed with her striking. Because it is fun to think of just like, okay, what if she went in, terrible example here, but like the Brock Lesnar style, that I'm just going to get you to the ground as fast as I can because on the feet I'm terrible. And Brock makes it work, right? What would it look like if she had done that against a Holly Holm? If she'd said, I'm not striking with her, because remember they said she was a far better striker than Holly Holm. She's not even close. And same thing with Nunes. I really was hoping, I remember doing this podcast, we were talking about it, like just hoping that let's see her try to throw her down. Let's see. But nope, just decides to stand with Nunes.
Well, two things I say. One, there was some video footage of slowing that fight down, showing Ronda trying to get a hold of Nunes and Nunes slipping. So I don't even know that Ronda was exclusively trying to stand with her. I think there was a moment of panic where Ronda did try to get Nunes, but she just couldn't grip her. It was too late at that point. And I know what you're saying.
No, you know why you don't know? Because Ronda, you know why you don't know if that's true or not? Because Ronda doesn't fucking speak to the media about MMA, and yet they choose to promote her and not get behind somebody like Cyborg who tries.
One thing I will say in the UFC's defense, because I was thinking about this too, if Ronda and Cyborg had fought when they were supposed to, I think Cyborg would have destroyed Ronda Rousey, and then we may not be talking about the Ronda Rousey show that went on for so many years. So in a way, it was the smartest thing they could have done promotionally.
Speaking of not getting it twisted, they made the right move all the way. Mm-hmm. It's just the minute Ronda loses, I think you make 145 and you commit to it. And this has been this half-ass thing where that last one, I couldn't even remember her name, where they just inserted her in a main event in like March or April or whatever it was, at the last second against a girl that like wasn't even ranked or whatever it was.
Nobody knew who she was.
They're just wasting her just to get by, and it's like, no, do this. Look, they're getting it right this minute. The Nunes fight is a step in the right direction, but where do we go from here? What happens now? Did they waste? Has there ever been a better, more impactful athlete who didn't get to the main show until this late in their career? Like Fedor or something, right? But Fedor, you can always make the case that he fought a lot of cans. You know, the other main sports, you don't hear about like the best baseball player in the world being in Japan. Sometimes, right? Sometimes you'll get like a Yu Darvish comes over here and like his best pitcher in the world, but it never really turns out that way. They're always just like, okay. She came over and it's like, oh shit, she's the best female fighter in the world. It's a real shame we missed her prime.
I mean, I think, you know, just living in the Chicagoland area, Javier Baez, like he's one of those, like he was in the league and he come over here and he damn near won the MVP this year. So,
but
like,
he's young.
I understand. Yeah, exactly. Like you see that in young players, fighters, like athletes.
We're missing her. We missed her prime.
Her prime. This is almost like if Tiger Woods just won the PGA Tour. This is like if he never won anything until right now.
Her prime was wasted in that 5 years or whatever in Invicta.
Yeah,
nobody was watching. It was so fucked.
They almost waited too long on Renan Barão.
Yes, that's fair.
I mean, the dude had like 1,000 fights before they finally brought him over to the UFC, but he became champ and eventually lost.
I mean, Ben Askren,
Ben Askren's a good one because this will be a diminished Ben Askren, and you can make a case about a lot of those Pride guys or whatever, but they were fixed.
Glover Teixeira, maybe.
Yes,
his prime I think was right when he came, or before he came.
My question is, she's literally could be the best female fighter of all time. Glover Teixeira is not the best fighter of all time. None of these people are.
There's no comparison. Like she's the best. She's a one of a kind.
And like you said, people shit when I've heard the media on whatever sports radio, people talking about that card. They literally refer to it as the John Jones card. It's the John Jones. Nobody's talking about Cyborg.
I mean, let's not be wrong about this though. Like John Jones and Alexander Gustafsson is also was like the greatest fight of all time. So there's a reason why it's being shadowed, but I agree it shouldn't. This big of a fight shouldn't necessarily be with that. It's almost like if they put Connor on the card with John Jones, like, okay, you have two big names. Why wouldn't you split them up?
Yeah, well, that's what I was getting at earlier, and I think Taylor's rebuttal is a strong one. I think that again, it gets eyes on her, but is it too little, too late? She's already saying a lot.
The other question,
she's already like talking about done being.
Yeah, I was going to say the other question we're not talking about, and I know it was partially Amanda Nunes' call stepping up to fight. She was asking for the fight with Cyborg, but maybe the UFC thinks, they're crossing their fingers. We'll get a Nunes win, and then once again, we can be done with Cyborg.
Well, they failed on her, as it's well documented as well.
Oh yes,
and that's the thing. We're not doing. The Brazilian steroid, all the shit. Go listen to the Nunes episode. You know what I mean? This isn't just Cyborg is a complicated character. Nunes isn't really. Nunes is a very sympathetic character. And again, this is where there's that disconnect because this fight should kind of be. It's so complicated with Cyborg because it's Nunes. How weird is this? Nunes is this nice, wonderful person, but the smartest way to market her would be as the Barbie killer, like we said. And yet Cyborg is seemingly, according to a lot of people, a super nice woman, obviously a thing with her niece, helps out with children, but yet she also, the smartest thing is and yet they're both kind of stuck in the middle. They're just in this weird middle ground. There's like a disconnect between their nice personalities at times and what they should be marketed.
I don't
as.
think with the times the way they are, I don't think it's that difficult to promote a woman as just being a destroyer. Why can't you promote that? Why not?
I think here's what I think. Selfishly, if I'm the UFC, okay, I do the Mike Tyson thing as fast as I can, right? Here's my solution for Cyborg is you give her a bunch of easy fights, right? She beats Nunes, give her a bunch of easy fights, build her up, because eventually her skills are going to erode. This is a business decision, what I'm about to say. And you could give her the Anderson Stylebender treatment, right? Because they're clearly, for right or wrong, better or worse, they're using Anderson to introduce the world of Stylebender. And somebody, you got to hope in that 3-4 years, pay her the world to hang around. Pay her the world. This is the business side here, not her personally. Pay her the world to hang around because you will make somebody a goddamn star if they knock out Cyborg. Even if it made Chris Weidman a star, because you could debate all night long if Anderson was over the hill at that point. Nobody remembers it that way. Chris Weidman's the guy that beat Anderson Silva. Make sure somebody is the person that beats Cyborg. Because Mayweather never passed the torch on. They never gave him. He was smart enough to avoid like the Canelo. He fought Canelo too early, and he always Manny too late. He always weaseled his way around it. 50-0, nobody passed the torch. They got to make sure on the business side Cyborg needs to pass the torch. And right now she's fighting nobodies. I don't know.
All right. Well, if you haven't watched Cris Cyborg fight after this episode, I hope you will watch her next fight because it is going to be crazy. And we often leave little clips at the end of the episode after the music. And I'm just going to leave a clip on this episode of Cyborg hitting mitts in the gym.
Nasty.
Because if you've never heard this woman hit, it is nasty.
You guys think she's going to win? I know you're closing it out. You think she's going to win? Nunes? We didn't even talk about it.
Do you think Nunes?
No, it's Cyborg and Nunes. You have we're not a prediction podcast, but do you think she's going to continue her reign?
I really don't know. Like it's one of those like to me this feels like a heavyweight fight where this you know what this feels like to me? This feels like TJ Dillashaw, Cody Garbrandt 1, not 2, 1. Where someone's going to get clipped, it's who's going to do it first.
Sure.
So I think Cyborg's she's gonna be the one to pressure. She's gonna be patient. I think Cyborg's gonna get her. I think she's gonna win.
I think you're right. I think if this,
I don't think this is her time to.
I think if it was 3 years from now, Nunes could be the one to take over the throne, and it would be the perfect like predecessor or protege. But
it's
successor.
What Amanda Nunes are we gonna get? Are we gonna get the Shevchenko where she was like super laid back, like kind of like. Shevchenko's a striker. Like, she did not pressure her, and we saw what happened. If she does that, I think she gets mauled by Cyborg. But if she goes the way that she did against Ronda, where she knew she could attack, or Miesha Tate, I think she definitely has a fair shot.
Oh, yeah.
I actually see this going much like the Nunes-Shevchenko fight. So I don't think someone's going to get clipped. I think this is going to be a very competitive. I think if Tanya Avenger can go with Cyborg, I think Amanda Nunes can absolutely, because
it's true.
Do not underplay or downplay Shevchenko. I mean, Shevchenko is again.
Oh, I'm not downplaying.
No.
Anything.
I know you're not. I just want it to be clear, and we could be talking next podcast and after a Cyborg knockout. So this is not a sure prediction by any means, but Shevchenko is a very, very skilled striker. Cyborg is a very skilled striker as well, but a lot of her finishes come from her power and her size. If Amanda Nunes can hang with the skill set of Shevchenko, I think she can hang with the skill set of Cris Cyborg, and I think we might see a very compelling fight. I'll just say that. I think maybe Cyborg gets it done in the end when it's all said and done, but I'll put it this way. I won't be shocked if Nunes gets the better of her. I really won't.
You can call this a hot take if you want. I don't think it is because it's not out of the realm of possibility. I think this fight might be better than Jones-Gustafsson just because there's so much pressure on that main event fight because of how good the first fight was. I think that this could, it could be better. Like, it could go the distance. I don't think Jones is and Gustafson's going the distance, personally.
Yeah,
But
Gustafson knockout in round 2. Got it.
where's the flag?
Yeah.
All right, well, 2 women fighting inside a steel cage isn't for everyone, but stories like Cris Cyborg's are. This is MMA Untold, and if you didn't know, now you know.
Call a crib, same number, same hood, it's all good. And if you don't know, now you know, you know.